All right, hey, it's 7 o'clock Monday night. We're live here in Warsaw, Illinois. We got an awesome special guest tonight. Really been looking forward to this, so really excited about that. We'll wait till a few people jump on. When you jump on, hit the like button so we kind of know you can hear everything good. The sound's good. Share this. If you've got friends, share it on your social media, YouTube, Facebook. Let's get as many people in here as watching as we can. If you have questions about bait fish, catfish, carp, anything, tonight is the night to ask that question. We're going to go over all that in detail. So really excited about that. So get a few people on here. I'm going to go ahead and play. I don't know if anybody's seen our Caruthersville, Missouri video from just 2 weekends ago. We're going to play that, wait for a few people to jump on. Then we'll have Liz go over all the past weekend stuff in Pekin, Illinois, and a little bit about the points, and then we'll bring our special guest in. So again, hit the like button if you can hear everything good, and share this on your page so we can get as many people in as we can. And here is our Caruthersville, Missouri video. Enjoy that, and we'll jump right back in. At 50.40 big fish. Let's put the other two on. Oh yeah, we're over 103.51. Let's give a round of applause. First place team, 103.51. Hey everyone, we had a great event here in Caruthersville, Missouri. We're here at Grizzly Jig, and like I said, we had 38 teams. Awesome event, great weigh-in, some big fish. We had a 75-pound big fish, 68-pound second big fish, a total weight for 138. Again, awesome time. Grizzly Jig, Caruthersville. They had a lot of things, a lot of vendors going on. It was fun being down here. Oh yeah, we're over 103.51. Let's give a big round of applause. Your new first place team, 103.51. Out of Bluffs, Illinois, Steve Henderson, president of Sea Arc Boats. And John Ed, are you? Oh my. Kirk's already got gloves on. That only means one thing. Oh yeah, turn around and show the crowd behind you. Look at that. We're gonna have a good bag here. Lots of things for anglers to do. We had anglers from Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Iowa, all over the Midwest traveling here to Caruthersville, Missouri to fish this giant Mississippi River to catch big blue cats. And we've seen a lot of flatheads today, just like we did at our last event. Show the crowd that. That was nice flathead. Who caught all the fish today? Really? Donald, Johnny, and Charles are also, they're in the top 5 in points right now. There's a good one. Nice big live well on the Sea Arc Pro Cat 240. 3 grown men to get a big blue cat out. That's when you know we're in Caruthersville, Missouri on the Mississippi River. And they got a nice string. 8.15. Let's give a big round of applause. Hey, and again, we want to thank the sponsors for the 2023 season. We got a lot of big sponsors this year that's helping grow the sport of catfishing and helping grow Twisted Cat Outdoors. Again, the payout is crazy this year. It's 100% payout on all entries. Plus, we got a $500 Big Fish Castaway Customs bonus. So it's over 100% payout. All of it goes back to the anglers. Out of 38 teams today, it was $11,400 payout plus $500, so $11,900 total payout, over $5,000 for first place. That's a big payout, and again, it keeps growing. And like I said, we have a $35,000 championship. It's a no entry fee. So lots of things are happening, lots of things are coming. You want to be a part of it. Catfishing, we had 2 new teams today. Never fished a catfish tournament. They came here today, they loved it, they caught fish. And they want more. So it's exciting to see this sport grow. I can't wait to see what it's going to be in 5-10 years from now. 99.17. Jeff and Randy Dodd, $1,520 minus, I think it's, what is it, 160?
No, I thought that was I thought that
No, you gotta go to her and talk to that. No, that's they literally bought a net during the tournament, first ever. All right, second place, Joe Hardy, Barry Wilson. They sat in the hot seats for a while, and they are hot. Obviously, you can tell the sun's right at them. But he got knocked out at the end. But it's good enough for second place. $2,534. And your first place and big fish team, Andy Needham, Billy and Bobby Littleton, 138.15 total weight. Their big fish, 75.25. So they get a $5,066 for first place. And then the Castaway Customs, $500 big fish added money. That's a lot of money, a lot of hardware.
Good job. Good job.
Hey, you already have enough hands to shake after all this stuff. Great job. Get a few pictures and. You said you had a rough day fishing, but we're gonna go fishing anyways. And Brad wasn't gonna make it. He said it's not. So what changed?
Really nothing changed. We had 5 bites today. Caught 5 fish.
So 5 bites.
Yesterday I had 3 bites all day. That's it. And I didn't vote in fish.
So did you bump? All 3 of you were bumping, or deep water, shallow?
40s.
So 40s. Were you marking fish, or?
Not really. We mostly fish out of some history.
There you go. Crothersville, Missouri was a great event. And then we went from there to Pekin, Illinois. And we're going to bring Liz in and have her go over all the info about Pekin. Let's see if she can hear us good. There you are.
All right. So like Alex said, we just got done putting the event on in Pekin. We had 36 teams, 89 anglers. Of the 89 anglers, we had 5 youth anglers. That's a good amount of youth anglers. It was fun to see them all in the boats, pulling out fish. And then out of those also, we had 5 lady anglers. So that's really good to see too. The total weight we had in Pekin weighed was 897 pounds, 0.22. While we were in Pekin also, we awarded our youth angler of 2022, Timothy Keel. He was awarded that from last year. So Friday night we had a little get together at Ray Dennison Chevrolet, and we did a fun Calcutta with the anglers. We did our cornhole game, and where every registered angler gets to have a chance to throw a bag, and if they make it, and the winner gets a free entry to an upcoming Twisted Cat Outdoors event. And Pekin's winner was Steve Moore. So I'm sure we'll see him at a tournament here soon. And then Saturday morning, we checked live wells 5 to 7, and then fishing was 7 to 3. While the anglers were out there fishing, I think we set up twice, maybe 3 times, Alex. I'm not sure. I can't remember because it started raining like crazy. We were under a bridge. We got out of it a little bit, but yeah, so that was fun. First place, they weighed 67.37. They won $4,800. The total payout was $11,300, and $500 of that was a Castaway Customs big fish. That first place went to Bobby Lee, Kyle Johnson, and Zach Sharp. And then our second place winners was Nate Blint and Lily Blint, and they had that big fish that awarded them $500 from Castaway Customs. Saturday was fun. We had a couple food vendors under the bridge there. The mayor, Mary, came down and spoke and loved the weigh-in. It was really cool to have the mayor down there speaking. And I think that's a wrap, really.
Yeah, no, it was fun. There was, like I said, probably the most golf carts we've ever had at a weigh-in, for sure.
There was a ton of golf carts, yeah.
I think we had 10 golf carts come watch the weigh-in, but no, it was a great event. So really excited. And the biggest thing about Pekin is, like what we talked about most of the season, is that was going to be the event that really shook things up. Like I made in the post today, I like my points shaken, not stirred. They are all over. There were people in the top 50 that got kicked way out, people that moved in. And like I was thinking, about 720 points is what it'll take to get into the championship. So there's 2 events left. Our next tournament is this Saturday in Canton, Missouri, and it is a Jack and Jill, 2 adults. But if you have 2 adults on the boat, it's got to be male, female, and as many kids 18 and under as you would like to have in your boat per boat regulation. If you have any questions about that, again, it's only $150 entry, 100% payout plus $500 big fish. So it's a great payout. It's fun. We've been going to Canton for years. We're excited to be back there. We're going to go there Wednesday, make sure that all the ramp situation looks good, and see how we're going to do our takeoff. You know, we usually do a shotgun start even with this event. Like I said, it's a family fun event, and then we'll weigh in at the park. We just got to make sure that the ramps are accessible with the low water down there, and making sure that's all good. But we'll let you know on Wednesday. And if you have any questions at all, feel free to give us a call. Don't ever assume. But we'd love to see this weekend also for $150 entry. And then after that, it's Alton, Illinois, that Twisted Cat will be there helping run that event. The tournament director, I guess, sort of the side of it. And right now, I think we just talked to Mark, and there's 98 boats in that. So I think there's only 2 spots left unless anything changed this afternoon. So that's a big payout. Always fun to be a part of that. The jerseys and the dinner and all that stuff, and the payout's insane. I think it's well over 100% payback. It's a $500 entry, but it's a $52,000 payout, $20,000 for first. So that's going to be fun. You're going to see some big fish. So, and then our next Twisted Cat Points event will be Tulsa. You don't want to miss Tulsa, and then New Madrid. And then after New Madrid, we're going to find out who the top 50 anglers are and invite them to our championship. So yeah, I think that's kind of it. And any, like I said, any questions about points, tournaments, upcoming, past, reach out to us on social media or give me a call. We're excited to get things rolling. It's been crazy. I think the last few weeks we've been at an event almost every weekend. So yeah. Anything else you got to add?
Not here. It was a fun event. Like we said, the spectators, there was so many of them, lots of kids watching, which is always fun to see. And
there's a lot of kids, we always push the spectators, and we really did get them in Pekin. But by far, I would say the star of the show and the best part of the event was Lily Blint.
Lily Blint.
And if you were watching the live feed, it knocked Doug Rice down on his butt when she pulled those fish out. And I am not talking bad about the anglers, but not many anglers can pull fish out better than she can. She's 6 years old, holds the live well up herself, one hand grabs channel cat and flathead pulling them out. And she was aggressive. She wasn't scared one bit. She almost pushed her dad out of the way to get to the others. So that's really awesome seeing that and seeing more youth get involved. That's what it's all about, to help grow the sport. So that was fun. And then again, like Liz said, we had the cornhole events. That's 3 free entries we've gave away. You don't want to ever miss Friday night. It's not mandatory, but you're going to get good info, chance to win some stuff. So you want to be a part of that. And again, thanks to all the sponsors, anglers, spectators, and volunteers from this past weekend. Thanks, Danny Sapp. It was a great weekend. So,
yeah.
All right. Well, Liz, thank you. And now we'll introduce our special guest and have a fun night here on our Monday Night Live podcast. All righty. See you, Liz. Thanks.
See ya.
All righty. Okay, here we are. Test. Let me shut. Okay. If you can still hear me, give me a thumbs up just so I know everything's working good. Hey, Sterling, Aaron. Sterling is watching. I love it. So I'm making sure we got an external mic so everybody can hear us good. Hopefully it's still working and the view looks good. All good, Jake says. So tonight, our special guest, Jim Lamer. Jim, it's been probably 4 years or so, a couple years since you've been on.
Okay, yeah, 4 or 5.
So Jim is also from Warsaw. He's got a son that's Rhett's age, and we've kind of known each other for quite a while now. And then also just with the fishing and everything we do, he had some students do a study with Twisted Cat for 2 years. So let's kind of get in. I'll let Jim kind of introduce himself, a little bit of his background. And if you have questions, let us know. I've seen Scott had a good question. Nate's got a good question. Ask the questions. Let's make this fun. If you're on Facebook, share it. Try to get some more people watching. Let's really kind of dive in about anything you want fishing. Jim's going to know it for sure. So I'll let Jim introduce himself real quick, and then we'll kind of get things going. So Jim, if you want to kind of tell him your backstory a little bit.
Sure. Yep. Yeah. Thanks, Alex. Yeah. I'm a large river ecologist with the Illinois Natural History Survey, and I'm director of the Illinois River Biological Station in Havana, Illinois. And we do work pretty much on the entire Illinois River, fisheries research, fisheries monitoring, and a large portion of the Mississippi, really from between carp work and the long-term monitoring that we do. It's really pool 14 down to pool 24 or so. And we have a sister station down at pool 26 at Alton, and that's kind of where I cut my teeth, or got my feet wet, I guess.
Yeah.
In fisheries research and really river research in general. And so I've really had a presence on the river for the last 23, 24 years now. Just doing various river research and river monitoring. So in some of the areas like the Illinois River, the Grange reach of the Illinois River. You guys said you're in Pekin there. And so that's an 80-mile stretch there. We've been doing long-term monitoring there for about 30 years, give or take. And we collect data in the same standardized way that people like in pool 4 in Minnesota, and then pool 8 in La Crosse, Wisconsin, pool 13, Bellevue, Iowa, pool 26 at Alton, and then the folks at Cape Girardeau, we all collect data the same way, using different, the same fisheries gear, standardizing that gear. So we can make comparisons over time and look for trends in abundance and, body condition of fish, and, just how the fish population's doing and how the fish population's responding to, to various events, whether it be, point pollution or, big changes, in policy that might affect, fisheries or fishing regulations or things. A lot of times we can detect that in our trend data from our abundance stuff. I think in the last 4 years, we've been, this is our 5th, we've been surveying the entire Illinois River, all the way from Lockport Pool down to the confluence in Grafton there. And that's like 1,800 sites, per year on the entire Illinois River there. And so,
Can you see some blues there too? Because you asked about if we had any blues in this tournament.
Right.
And I want to say 1-2 teams had some blues.
Okay.
Nothing big. I mean, I think the biggest blue is maybe 16 pounds.
Yep, they do pick them up occasionally, but it's not something we see every day for sure. You go down to pool 26, and they're frequently encountered in that gear down there. They set, the thing with our gear is it's random, and so we have a fisheries independent assessment, and that if you target it, you bias your samples, right? You're just targeting fish where they're going to be, and so it's hard to estimate abundance that way. So we do random sites within different habitat strata, like mid-channel borders, side channel borders, and we usually get our catfish, especially our like flatheads, channel catfish, and blue especially flatheads and blues in our hoop net surveys, large and small. And some reason we don't pick up too many blues in the Illinois River, especially where we're at. We're 80 miles up the Illinois River there, 80 to 160 is within our pool there. But like I said, a lot of the other pools, pool 26, open river, they get quite a few blues. And if people are interested in kind of looking at some of the trend data that exists for some of the catfish populations, if you go to the LTR, if you basically Google LTRM fish and type in graphical browser, or just click the button that says graphical browser, they'll give you some options. You can pick, large hoop nets. You can pick, pool 26, and then it'll actually give you a graphical output of showing, the trends and those abundance of those populations over time. And you can pick up body condition, those sort of things as well. So yeah, it's very powerful having that long-term data, those long-term data sets.
Because that's what. So Scott asked, he'd like to know about catfish migration, and especially where we live, Pool 20 of the Mississippi River. We always talk about this. Pool 19. There's blue cats. There's not blue cats. I've never weighed one. A lot of these dams, like we talked about earlier before the show, are kind of free flowing. They have more of the roller gates. But here, the biggest dam on the Mississippi is a little bit different. Obviously, they can't swim through the gates there. They can maybe walk through, but it's different. So, this time of year is really good, or the summer when they migrate north for spawning. There's been a lot of big blues caught here in Pool 20. Maybe the most I've ever seen. Just more people are getting involved, but come a few weeks from now, it seems like they just disappear. So I'm guessing they migrate south. How far south, I don't know. I know that blue cats do migrate a lot. What I guess are some of your thoughts on the migration, maybe the times they move and why they move? Because it seems like that May they come up here steady, and then right by the Jack and Jill, the beginning of September, it's either really good blue cats or no blue cats. So what's kind of your thoughts on that, I guess?
So of course, as you mentioned, Lock Dam 19 here, at zero water stage, it has I think roughly like a 38 hydraulic head. And so it would need to be a pretty impressive blue cat to be able to get above that. But, so again, the only way they could get up is through the lock chamber there. And I think historically, prior to, installation in 1913, they probably did migrate up some. And, they're really known for their migratory behavior, even traveling, hundreds of miles. And you can get blue cats that are, coming up the Miss, and then we have receivers that are on the Missouri River, and you can actually pick them up going up the Missouri River, way up the Missouri River. And there's some fish species. I'm not sure if blue cats have been documented there, but ones that have similar life history characteristics on migration that have been almost go all the way up to Gavin's Point Dam, border of South Dakota up there in the Missouri River, and come back down, and so that blue cats are highly mobile, and sometimes if you have really low water, there are other dams on the system that restrict movement, especially upstream movement. Most things can move over and go downstream a lot of time in a lot of these dams, but being able to come up and through, if you get these stages here at like 4 feet or 4.5 feet, a lot of times a lot of the dams below will be closed and prevent movement up. But
we did have a little bit of a flood this spring. I mean, small enough, I think, where maybe that helped bring them up, and then the water seemed like it dropped. I mean, I think it was like maybe 12 to 14 foot from what I remember.
Yep.
So maybe that's why they came up like they did in the spring. Low water has really kind of made it easier to catch them.
No, I would say so. Yeah, exactly. You're right. Yeah, you kind of start as you shrink, you're fishing in a barrel essentially. But yeah, I think that I think higher discharge and higher water levels, fish are wanting to move. A lot of fish species like to move upstream during this time.
And it seems like blues like current. A lot of guys are fishing, heavy current using big weights. So, is there such thing as too much current for a fish or a catfish?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, you're right. I mean, we'll set hoop nets in 2 meters per second, and which is pretty fast water in some areas, and especially when I was working at Pool 26, you could just fill up and blue cats and little, even smaller fiddler type blue cats as well.
So, in your opinion, are migrating blues recognizing Asian carp as food source, pushing the blue migration further up the Illinois River? So, that's Bobby Lee actually won the tournament this weekend with blues. They had, I think, Bobby, you might have to correct me. I want to say you had 3 blues, maybe more. And then Mike had an albino blue cat. Not that they were big blues. We've heard of bigger blues caught up there, and I've seen pictures. And you couldn't go past Beardstown Bridge. So the anglers had to fish above Beardstown Bridge and upriver. So that's where they were caught. I'm sure. I think those 2 teams went south. I'm not sure how far. So I think that's a good question. Are they traveling to go after those carp?
That is a good question. I don't think we know for certain. We do know that, so we actually conducted a diet study at Pool 26 and Ellis Bay there a few years back, where we found that I think in the fish that had diet contents that didn't have empty stomachs, that we found, I think in 70% of those, we found traces of silver carp or big head carp of some degree. And we have demonstrated, like in years where they have really big production of carp, like 2014 was a huge production year on the Illinois River, that every game fish you find out there, we did get content analysis on those, and they were just, some of them were just full of silver carp, those inch long, 25 millimeter fish that, they were just gorging on them. Things like white bass were selecting for them, but channel cat, we found a lot of channel cat with those in their diets as well. So, but those don't happen every year. There is often some level of production every year, but it varies. Like 2008 was huge there. 2014 was huge. 2021 was an extremely big year, and so I think those years on the smaller fish, and but they can grow so quick in those systems that often they can outgrow their predators in a lot of ways. So if you're not catching really big blue cats, it may be likely that you're not chasing them up there, if that makes sense.
So on like the silver carp, they grow, rapidly. And that was something interesting we talked about, is fishing up in this area. Generally, over the years, you don't catch a lot of small silvers at all. Usually they're pretty big up here. But then I remember several years ago, you would go down to St. Louis and you could catch a lot of like 10-ish, by the hundreds. But I've never seen them like that up here. You were kind of talking about how they spawn and their eggs float. Is that kind of
right? Yeah. So they have semi-buoyant eggs, depending on when they hatch and when they drift out of the current and make these lateral movements to backwaters and side channels and lower velocity areas. It's really dependent on how fast the water is moving and the temperature of water. But let's say it could take anywhere from like 24 to 36 hours for them to hatch, and so they could be a long way away from their source at that time. And so a lot of the fish that we, especially up here, I think there is a source reproducing population up the Des Moines River, maybe below Red Rock. And so any smaller fish that we do see up here, I think a lot of those are probably sourced there, or ones that are spawned, because even the ones that are spawned below the dam here, we had an assessment done based on water temperature and velocity, and most of those, we had a big spawning event. You could see them out here. They were chasing each other, and we actually picked up some eggs, and we took an egg trawl out there and picked up some eggs while they're spawning just right up, Mud Island, just below Keokuk Bridge here. And based on the modeling, most of those eggs would have been ready to move out of the currents and actually start to, inhabit those side, stop drifting about Kentucky or Tennessee. And so depending on the water level and, how fast it's moving, it can move those out of the system pretty quick. And so it's not a huge surprise to me that we may not, we don't see a lot of young ones up here, because they need to be 100, 200 millimeters often before they're starting to make that upward migration again and getting a little bit larger up here. And given they don't have these really big production events every year, it's pretty episodic, and just when those conditions are right, that the water temperatures, sustains hatching and produces estrus in the fish where they're wanting to go out and go and spawn, as well. And then, and then the water currents are all right, throughout the year. The water discharge, they like a high discharge. It kind of induces estrus in those females, and then their conditions are right, then they can really produce these huge year classes in certain years, but not every year.
So back to the spawning, like on blue cats, there's always been, blue cats or catfish in general, blue cats spawn first, then channels, then flatheads, and they always spawn in June. Is it the same catfish where it could be they do multiple times a year? We've seen a lot of like post-spawn fish, sometimes even in October, where it looks like they're coming off the nest. And what's your thoughts on catfishing? Or catfish spawn?
That's a good question. And there's actually not a lot of supporting data, to say one way or another where they're actually putting up multiple spawns per year. We had a nest use study that, as part of a train derailment mitigation, they put in some catfish nesting structure for flathead catfish on Rock River. And so We had teams that we tagged a lot of fish, and we use VHF tags, and we're able to basically monitor their movements within a pool and be able to follow them and find out where they're going, how much they're moving, and see what sort of habitats they're occupying. Their nest use there was, we were hoping to maybe get at that question, but we weren't able to get enough detections. But we did a deep dive into the literature to try to find, the answer to that. Are they, do they have really strong fidelity for one nest, and do some females and males, and then do they, will they try to spawn more than once? And we had difficulty answering that with our data, and there really isn't a lot out there. So it's a definitely worthwhile question, and something I think we're interested in pursuing in the future. So.
Let's see. We got Jake Nally. He's asking weight to age of blue cats, for instance, starting at 40 pounds to 100 pounds, how many years it takes in that area. So, obviously there's a lot of these blue cats are migrating stuff, but if you catch, it's interesting, you catch a lake blue cat compared to a lower Mississippi blue cat, they kind of look different, maybe because the current makes them, it seems like those lower Mississippi blue cats are real long. What do you know of would you say a 30-pound fish for general is how many years old compared to a 50? It really is highly dependent, like I said, on the system they're in, and how fast they grow. Depending on even if it's fish up here versus fish down south, but it'd be hard to say. They don't live extremely long, and so the blue cats grow pretty quick. So even it could even be 10, 12, 15-year-old fish. If folks have, you have to actually kill the fish, but if there are fish that end up dying or sacrificed, that we could probably take a look at the otoliths or ear bones and age those for folks if they had an interest in that. Nice.
So I don't know. Do you guys get mortalities?
No, we really. You might have some when you put back
air.
Or whatever, but for the most part, it's they come. Our goal is CPR, so they catch them, they keep them healthy, we weigh them, we put them back, and hopefully catch them again next year bigger and stuff. But
sure,
it's just interesting and as these anglers get better and more anglers, you're starting to see more fish, bigger fish. If you look at the data from the last 10 years of Twisted Cat, from what we weighed 10 years ago in a tournament, about the same number of boats to now, the fishing, if you look at it on scale, the fishing is going like this. I think it's a little bit mixture of anglers are getting better. They're getting more, they're learning more with YouTube and social media, and especially going out there and then the sonars to target those big fish. But we weighed probably the most big fish we've ever weighed was last year. And I think low water helps that, because obviously when you got high water, they can go out into the fields and they're hard to target. But the low water, in my opinion, helped that last year, catch those big fish. And I think that's why we've seen so many big fish this year. And I assume the next few weeks in these tournaments, we'll see big fish. And then we had George Young had a tournament down south in Vicksburg, and that was an insane, I think 15 boats had over 100 pounds in their biggest 3 fish. So,
that's impressive. I guess if you guys do end up recovering, we'd be happy to maybe look at those for you, though.
Yeah.
It's just, I got these little bitty ear bones that help with balance and in the water column and keeping themselves upright and things, and some sound transduction for some species. And we do a lot of those, especially we're doing a lot of channel catfish and a lot of the sport fish right now. But you can learn a lot and look back into their biological history by measuring, the distance between the annuli, between the rings, kind of like a tree ring.
Like a tree.
Yeah, exactly. Very similar, right? During the winter, they deposit these, rings, just like a tree would, these lines of arrested growth. And we can measure the distance between those, and we can start averaging them across those species for that year and determine what years are like good growing years and bad growing years. And we can get estimates of recruitment then as well, right? Like seeing how many fish of that age are there, and basically building these catch curves where we can determine good years of production as well. So good years they got really good spawn, and they recruited to that next adult level.
Nice.
Yeah, there's a lot of catfish research going on.
So, and then another thing that talking to I get to see a lot of anglers. So far we've had 518 in the last, just this year in unique anglers. So you hear, you go to the Pekin, you hear what they say, and you go to Burlington and you go to Cape or Crothersville, and you hear a lot of different things. One thing I heard is the Pool 19, they think that the fishing has gotten better, the catfishing, the channel cat. I mean, do you have any data on channel cat in Pool 19? I mean, usually we have good weigh-ins. We had a spectacular weigh-in, the best we ever had this year, and that was in April.
Right. Yeah. We did do some catfish work up in that pool, especially some diet work and things. And the fish up in that pool, they do tend to eat a lot more out of the benthos or the substrate that's up there. And so like burrowing mayflies and fingernail clams, and so it's being if you're familiar with that pool, there's a lot of flat ground. There's a lot of these. There's a really ample supply of vegetation and aquatic macroinvertebrates and things. And I even personally, catching some channels up there that some of their intestines, that you would just be full of fingernail clams. And so I think they're getting a lot out of that. Having all of that resource up there to eat off of, and they're not having to chase down fish, all the time, which takes more energy, right? Yeah. Energy expenditure. There is a difference in commercial harvest regulation too. And I think it's 13 inches up there that you can't take fish under under 13. No, you can't take fish under 15 inches up there. Well, it's 13 inches from the Des Moines River down. So, which could add basically another year of, theoretically another year of production before they're harvested as well. So it could contribute to the high densities of fish that are up there, as well as, and then basically the resources they have up there, to the better conditions.
Because it's one of the biggest pools on the Mississippi. I think it's 40 some miles long.
Yeah, I think 46.3 miles, and then I think
that was perfect. 46.3. But that's a huge pool, and then a lot of people call it lake, or don't they call it referred to as lake something?
Right, Lake Cooper, right?
Lake Cooper.
Yeah,
so.
Yeah. I mean, really, the bottom 20 miles is what we consider like impounded. You don't have much water fluctuation there, and that's because of historic Des Moines rapids that were there, really from Montrose down to the mouth of Des Moines. But there's historic rapids there, just like you'd find in any stream. It's just very large, 3 to 5 foot rock rapids. There's ones up in Moline, Rock Island Rapids as well. But yeah, so they put those one of the first dams they put in to impound those rapids, to allow navigation to occur. And when they put that in, and then they also put the power plant in, when it's basically a run of the river hydroelectric plant. There's only a handful of those on the river as well. I think part of the deal was that they were not going to have much water fluctuation. So yeah, I mean, there's times you can be anchored up in the upper, in the lower part of Pool 19 where you're actually drifting upstream, with the wind. But no, it's interesting because it's the last place you'll find, it's the last place you'll find submerged aquatic vegetation, which can be pretty important for some of our game fish, some trorchids and bass and things, and really just a lot of other fish utilize those.
And it's a good bass fish. I mean, I put in a few weeks ago, and there was 2 guys putting in to go bass fishing.
Yep.
I mean, nobody's putting in Pool 20 to go bass fishing that I've ever seen.
Right. Yeah. Nope. Yeah. Largemouth, smallmouth. They're really nice fish up there for both. And and you won't run into submerged aquatic vegetation again really till about in any substantial amount until you get to about Pool 13, which is in Bellevue, Iowa, up there. So it is a pretty significant pool. I mean, it's got a really unique history, and and it has had about 30 feet of sediment deposited above that dam since it was installed originally. And once they impounded that, once it hits the dam, it drops that bed load, right above the dam, and so it just compounds. And that's why you see that big explosion of lotus beds that are up there.
Yeah, so I remember growing up, you always could put it in Hamilton, and you would have to go through the chute that they would put poles in.
Right.
And as far as I know, I don't know that anybody goes through there anymore. So
yeah, I think it's a feedback loop, and it's that veg. It traps more sediment as you get more veg, and then more sediment's trapped. It basically decreases the volume of water on top of the substrate, and so therefore you get more light penetration, more vegetation, which traps more sediment.
Yeah, there's like the lily pads everywhere. So what do you think in 10, 15 years from now? I mean, will it continue to just, will they have to do something? Will they have to dredge it or?
Well, so dredging that much material would be extremely difficult. There's a paper, this is like back in like in 1986 that Nanny Bomix and Adams paper that talked about by the year 2050, they anticipated that area to revert to a narrow channel, and then that big flats that you see out there, above the dam, a lot of that to get to the main channel would revert to floodplain forest based on some of the modeling they were doing back then, and how much the sediment just keeps dropping out.
I would bet that's a pretty.
I tell you, it's not given it was 40 years ago or whatever. That's not a bad estimate.
Well, I'm 37, and I know. I mean, 20 years ago we were taking 25, 30-foot boats out of Hamilton, and now I don't know if you can take a boat out of Hamilton.
Yeah, I haven't tried in a while, but
I mean, they don't put the poles up anymore or
right,
nothing.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
It's definitely changed in the last 20. You know what I mean? So it can't be much. I don't know. That's
Right.
interesting.
No, for sure. Yeah, and it's definitely interesting.
So here, and speaking of 19 and 20, and I've told a lot of you this story. Now we have him here to tell us. So at one point, I don't know if I dreamed it, but we talked about something like you took and you tagged 4 silvers from 19 and you brought them down to 20 and they went back up. Can you kind of tell us that or how that went down? Because to me, I think of a silver carp that they don't have no brain and they're just going to go whatever. But I mean, for that story kind of blew my mind.
Yeah. There's kind of a long story to that about kind of, So, there's interest to know, how much reproduction is not going upstream, right, and how much is being retained in the system, and so that led to several studies. One is to see how frequently, silver carp can navigate the lock and go upstream from pool 20 to pool 19. We were also looking at like otolith microchemistry, so looking at the strontium calcium and barium calcium ratios in their ear bones and comparing that to what the ratios that are in different water sources to tell where, and looking at the core of those otoliths basically when they're babies, and then looking at where they're born. So they're like skunks, like the skunk in Iowa and cedar all have similar signatures. So you could often, which is different than the main stem, and the Rock River has a very unique signature. So you could tell if a fish was spawned in the Rock or a fish was spawned in some of these other tributaries, or in the main, there's actually a unique signature above Loch Nam, upstream of Loch Nam 19 and then downstream as well. So we did some of that work and determined that there's maybe about 10% of reproduction of the fish we caught up there were actually caught up there, and the rest of them that we caught had moved through the dam. There's that part of it. Then you're right. We put these they look like lipstick cases, right? These little acoustic transmitters in these fish, and we actually surgically implant them, and we were able to move, if we translocate fish from 19 down below, there's motivation for those fish often we found to try to get back up to those areas and try to walk back through the dam. We had some individuals that were tagged in like pool 17, which is, the South Muscatine there. And we had I think we had one make several trips in this that had moved down over the dam, go down to the confluence with the Illinois River. One was detected up by Star Rock, came back, and then was able to eventually navigate back up through the lock and come back up. That same fish had made several passages. It took it a while to find its way back, but it's still. But then there's other fish that we will tag below that are tagged down here that they have trouble even challenging or finding a way through. But so there's it's kind of interesting to see that movement, and we've tagged some, jaw tagged some that have ended up in New Orleans or south of New Orleans and Baton Rouge, down there. So they make these big movements, and what's kind of unique about working with a lot of our federal and state partners is that we maintain a receiver network that has receivers above and below every dam, pretty much all the way up into Minnesota, and then some of the Minnesota tributaries, some of the tributaries up there as well. So anytime that fish passes that receiver, they'll detect it, and it knows exactly what fish it is, the code for the fish. It knows, when it passed, and when it came, when it might have come back. The main motivation for those is to look, evaluate dam passage, and see how they're moving through the dams. But we learn a lot of other information on movement and things as well. So right now they have the U.S. Geological Survey, Fish and Wildlife Service, and other state partners are all evaluating, and Army Corps of Engineers are evaluating an underwater acoustic deterrent system right here at 19.
Yeah, I heard something about that. I thought that was a joke, but obviously not.
No, yeah. So they, it's actually a big sound bar that's put right in the lock approach, before you get into the lock chamber on the downstream side. And so they're tagging an enormous amount of fish. And a lot of those fish, like you said, the last 3 years, tagged 500 fish, invasive carp, upstream of the dam and translocated them below because they're more likely to try to challenge the deterrent system. And so that they're basically turning that on and seeing if it's deterring carp, because carp are a stereophysid fish, which means they have this special apparatus called the Weberian apparatus, which basically it's really sensitive to sound. A lot of the suckers and Catastomus buffalo and things have that. Catfish to some degree, they're also stereophysids that in a different frequency, but they found a frequency that really tends to affect carp more than a lot of those other stereophysid type fish. And so that they'll basically turn that on. It produces that sound at that frequency, trying to deter them from wanting to get into the lock so that they would make further upstream passage. So I don't know how many fish, I don't have the total numbers in front of me, but they try to get at least 500 per year over the last 3 years. So that's 1,500 fish that have been tagged and moved down below, as well as they want to see how that affects native fish. So there's flatheads tagged down there. There's lake sturgeon, walleye, white bass. They're trying to, as many American, if they can get any American eel, they're trying to do those as well. And so I think they're going to have one more year probably of tagging another. So, you could theoretically catch fish out here, with these little tags inside of them.
Would you be able to know that's inside though?
A lot of them are jaw tagged as well, so they have some sort of external marking so that that okay, I don't want to take a big bite out of this fish because it might have a tag in it. But and so it's kind of interesting, and it's valuable too, because then if those fish are making downstream, a lot of that data hasn't been crunched. Given the volume of fish we have, and the primary objective is the underwater acoustic deterrent, but that data is available to evaluate other patterns of movement, just because we have that really extensive and impressive receiver network, throughout really not only Mississippi, Ohio, Missouri, Lower Mississippi, Illinois River. It's there's receivers everywhere, so we're detecting fish movement over these huge migrational journeys that these fish are taking. So
interesting. So soon we'll know if that was working with those 1,500, because if they go through, you're gonna know.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and I think they have a couple different objectives. One is to see how many challenge it, how many make it into the lock, and then how many make full passage. And it's kind of crazy because there's even these VPS, or these virtual positioning arrays, where you have several receivers that when they talk to each other, then they can actually triangulate once it's in that lock chamber or that lock approach. It can triangulate where in that lock approach that fish is trying to come, and you can actually it'll actually give almost like it's basically a 2D position of where that fish is in that lock chamber. And there's some with even depth tags, so you can get almost 3D positioning, giving depth and then actual where lat and long of where that fish is trying to make movement. And if they're it's kind of crazy, some of the technology that's out there and things they're able to do with it right now.
That is interesting.
And if you're fishing down in pool 24 or pool 22, there's a lot of fish that have been tagged in pool 22 as well. There's the Corps of Engineers is installing a fish passage structure at 22 to evaluate basically native fish movement and determine how much invasive fish movement over the fish ladder as well. But during times when there's basically closed river conditions, when you don't have gates open or open river conditions, that they could use this fish ladder.
Yeah, so I guess explain the fish ladder. So I've heard of that term, and I've heard that, obviously there's not a fish ladder here technically, but how does
Right.
the fish ladders work? Is it something you can see? Is it just how are they installing that?
It is, and it's actually so. I don't quote me on this, but I think it's an elevational difference of like 11 feet on that dam, and so that the fish when they're so they basically have to get up, basically get over the top, and so it's not. You're probably thinking like ladder, right? Like, but it's more of this gradual. It almost looks like a hill that you're making a big curve on, and it has these transitional step zones that are has these kind of riffles that ends up in kind of pool, riffle, kind of pool, riffle, kind of pool, just enough where fish can get up into the next, and it's just the right amount of elevational difference that it can get up to that next pool. Then it can keep going up to those riffles and those next pools. And I'm pretty sure the Corps of Engineers probably has something on the website talking about locking in 22 fish passage, the fish ladder, as well. We have another fish passage device we're evaluating on the Illinois River. It's for the primary objective is to see if we can move carp, invasive carp. The secondary objective is to pass native fish, but it's a selective barrier that theoretically, and that we have it on a floating barge, and it's the same technology they use on the West Coast to move salmon over dams. Have you ever seen the salmon cannons, like these giant tubes and so it's a steep pass fish ladder, and then we're trying to find the conditions that are conducive to carp moving up that fish ladder. Because if they do, once they get to the top and they have no choice but to continue on through the fish ladder, we have a scanner that'll take 18 images of that fish as it moves through, and we can train the AI software to recognize species of that fish. It takes length, girth of the fish, it recognizes species. We can teach it to recognize invasive from non-invasive, and then basically we can build a backend component that within that AI decision network it has based on size, and it can direct it where to go from there. So we can take it to a tube that goes into a refrigerated unit for invasive carp or for disposal, or for marketing, to get rid of them one way or another. Or if it's native fish, we can either just let them flow through the system, or we can build, if we put it at pinch point dams, we could put it at dams and actually find ways to actually shoot them over the. I mean, it's a nice, gentle. They go through these big water slide looking tubes. They don't actually just free fly through the air. But yeah, you could theoretically set up different tubes and manifolds for different size and species of fish. River fish. So any of these fish that have been inhibited by these migratory barriers like dams, and it could be a mechanism to help get them connect those habitats, those longitudinal habitats again. Could be pretty interesting. We're really early. We're just about ready to get it operational now. We've done some trial stuff on the Illinois River, and it's located there on the Grange Reach, where you guys were fishing, for your tournament, and about halfway that from the pool, about near Havana out there. So
Interesting.
Yeah, we're kind of excited about it. We're really hoping we can make it work, and it could just be autonomously removing carp all the time, hooked up to electric, and they just come in. And,
so do you think how long have we had the silver carp problem? When did that start?
So early 70s, they were initially kind of brought into the U.S. and they had either had some escapements from facilities, and maybe some accidentally released and those sort of things. And we in the 90s, we really kind of started picking up in our monitoring programs. 2000s, they started achieving numbers and densities high enough to support reproduction, and noticeable reproduction. And then late 2000s, I was working down in Pool 26 around, until about 2006. And 2007, I know, was a year they just saw a really big explosion down there. And then 2008, we had that huge year class on the Illinois River. And after that, they've been pretty persistent from then on. So it was slow for a while, but yeah.
Do you think it's gone? I know we talked a little bit. We talked about usually they jump. Obviously, the last few years it doesn't seem like they're jumping as much. Um, could that just be water level, water temp, the flow, a lot of mixtures? Is the population gone down? Is there any evidence of that, or they're still?
Yeah. As of right now, so right now some of the best indicators of abundance, right? They're really hard to get a handle on just because they're not real sensitive to a lot of the gears we use, like electrofishing or those sort of things. But we have found a relationship between body condition and abundance, which implies that from our long-term monitoring electrofishing, which implies that it is a decent indicator of abundance. And we've seen numbers stay pretty steady. However, Illinois has a program that they're now implementing throughout most of the navigable waterways of Illinois, where they're adding, basically they're paying fishermen an extra 10 cents a pound to incentivize the removal of carp. And it started as a pilot in Peoria Pool on the Illinois River. They've expanded to the Grange in Illinois, the Lower Miss, Pool 26 in the Lower Miss, and up the Kaskaskia. We have it here in Missouri's implementing it in Pool 22, 21, 20. We're part of the program in Pool 18 and 19 up here as well. But any fisherman that takes it and sells it, they can get that, and it's enrolled in the program. They can take that receipt and they can send it in and basically get another 10 cents a pound for the poundage they remove. So they removed several millions of pounds, through that program just in the first couple of years in Peoria Pool. So that and Illinois is building markets, for the Kobe brand, and they're building infrastructure, and people that want to serve it in their fish markets and restaurants and things. And
because I've heard some of that, and several years ago at the St. Louis Boat Show, they had catfish and silvers and had you try them both, and I couldn't. I mean, it was good.
Nope. Yeah, they're pretty tasty, and we got
if you clean them right.
Right. Yeah. And we had one guy in our office that we had just a carp fish fry. We had smoked. We had them, we had brats, and he made them in these little almost like hush puppies. And man, they're just delicious. But no, very tasty. But yeah, Illinois has been really doing some great things on marketing, and they're working with Tetra Tech to help market those as well. And I think getting national brand interested in the frozen products, getting finding ways to extract the meat without getting a lot of bones, and mincing the meat. And there's a place in Peoria that's doing that now as well, and it's just excellent on tacos. Really nice meat. And so so I do think you're asking about abundance, but a lot of our monitoring programs on the Illinois River it's centered around evaluating some of these programs and how they're doing it, evaluating native fish response too, because we see like a lot of our native we've seen a decline in sport fish abundance, and since their arrival, and we've seen like some of our native planktivores like bigmouth buffalo and gizzard shad, we've seen reduction in body conditions since carp have been in the system.
Yeah, I was gonna say shad. I mean, I remember years ago shad was really easy to get. There was a lot of big shad. It seems like it's tougher. You know what I mean? Some people say there's more anglers now than ever. Some people say that the carp, have really kind of hurt their habitat, pushed them out of some of the areas where now when you go there, you just see there's carp everywhere. So, I mean, I wonder if the carp has hurt their habitat enough to maybe slow them down. I don't know.
No, I mean, I think you're probably onto something. I think it's more about, resource overlap and diet overlap, right? That, silver or, gizzard shad are planktivores, mainly eating phytoplankton, and that's the same thing that silver carp eat. And we know that, we have high densities of silver carp. We see density dependent depression on their own body condition and size structure, right? That you find an area like Pool 20 where they're pretty abundant, or the Grange, right, where they're really abundant, you see smaller fish than, like up down here, I think the average weight of a silver is somewhere around 8-9 pounds, something like that. You go up above the dam, it's around 18 to 20 pounds of
Wow.
silvers. It's
Almost
just,
double.
yep. And so they haven't, it's all about resource exploitation, and it's based on their, so if they can depress their own body condition based on their densities, then things that have, share the same resources are also going to see a decrease as well. And gizzard shad's one, and that's one of the values of our long-term data, is that we can detect those trends over time, right? And look at, gizzard shad condition decrease, since the arrival of carp in our long-term data. And, and so it's definitely, I think it definitely has an impact on, we know it has an impact on the body condition for sure.
Yeah.
Sport fish abundance, the number of sport fish, that's shown a decrease in a lot of our Alterian pools as well. So our long-term monitoring pools.
Because of silver's product.
Right.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of empirical evidence to tie them to looking at young of year fish, but it is hypothesized that, young of year fish, a lot of them start out as plankton eaters, right? And so you have, it's a pretty sensitive life stage, right? Making sure that they're being hatched and matched up with, with plankton resources that are in the area. But if you have this, we'll get big heads. We had two removed from pool 16 this week, last week, that were each of them were 90 pounds.
90 pounds.
Yeah, big heads were right about 90 pounds. But if you can imagine what a 90-pound, how much food a filter feeding 90-pound fish can eat, in a day, it's got to be pretty astronomical. Compared, if you have these small areas or isolated areas where finite resources, the losers are going to be these fish that are more vulnerable. Like could be larval and young of year sport fish and things as well.
And that's like the black carp that's starting to be another issue.
Right. Yep. Black carp. They're coming. A lot of those are being detected right now in the open river. Down Cape Girardeau and those areas. But they are. There's two been caught here in pool 20 actually. It was last year, the year before. There's been some caught up the Illinois River. We have a black carp surveillance program as part of our monitoring efforts. We have baited hoop nets with clam bait and cottonseed and just some empty hoops, doing some bait comparisons to evaluate the best way to capture those. And they're traditional molluscivores, and they can get over 100. There's one caught down there over 100 pounds in the lower part of the mist.
It's a giant.
Yeah, and so freshwater mussels are one of our most imperiled taxonomic groups that are out there in the river. Right, they're canaries in the coal mines. They're very sensitive to pollution and sedimentation and things. And so this is just another thing going against them, that, a large molluscivore like that, if they start getting as abundant as grass carp, which they look very similar to grass carp, or some big heads and silvers, then it'll be.
Do you think they will?
I don't know. I don't want to say on air. No, I mean, we have programs in place. There's, I've been part of a structured decision-making panel, finding the best ways to evaluate and, the ways we can, try to manage them now earlier in their invasion. It's tough once they're here. But we have seen their numbers, being reported more and more per year. There's a $100 bounty on those, that if, you catch one, you can turn it in for $100. And so that's so they can learn more about them, what they're eating. Looking at their otoliths, I was telling you with the otolith microchemistry, where you can actually assign them, see where they're spawning, right? So that maybe we can have some management actions targeted in those spawning locations, or and then barcoding the genetic, or genetically barcoding the diet items to find exactly what they're eating and other species that might be at risk. But all I can really say, we are seeing more and more of them each year. We do know they're reproducing. A lot of the young of year, one of the studies by Whitledge that he did looking at recruitment sources for those was they're spawning in either the lower Illinois or pool 26 lower area. And then a lot of their offspring were they're semi-buoyant eggs, kind of like pig and silver. So a lot of those eggs are basically maturing and becoming young fish down in the lower part of the mist. And so all the fish that are caught down there, they have made it, past at least Mel Price, a lot of them, we think, and that are spawning either in lower Illinois and so, yeah, and I think it's because they are reproducing, it's probably bad. And we already took the root in younger year and
Yeah, so we're
system, so.
yeah, it's 2023. So in 2033, we'll maybe come and look back at this and say, either they were stopped or they weren't, or how invasive they are. But
Right.
So, and then Aaron asked about this, kind of another question, but he said, like, with these tournaments and fishing, pre-fishing in multiple pools, or even like a lot of these tournaments you go to and we put in Cape. Well, a guy might, or an angler might go 100 miles south. So let's say that an angler goes from Cape to Memphis, catches his 5 fish in Memphis, brings them back to Cape to weigh those fish. We release those fish back in Cape. His question is, do you think that those fish go back to Memphis? Do they try to find, is that their home? Is it at that time of year they're moving through there? Like, what's your thoughts on, or if we catch them in pool 20 and they go and they lock back through and we weigh them in Canton next weekend? So when we let them go in Canton, will they come back up in the middle of pool 20, do you think? Or what are your thoughts on?
So this is just a guess. I don't, there's probably data out there for some species to answer some of that, but given how highly migratory they are, and the fish often do seem to have some recognition of just kind of looking at those motivated fish move from the upper mist, the carp, and move below the dam. I suspect that they'll probably be able to make it back where they want to go. Thinking 22 miles from Canton to here, that's pretty. I think that's a pretty short journey, and typically what they'd be used to.
Yeah.
So I suspect they'd probably be okay. I think with anything, this is kind of going with we surgically tag a lot of fish, and so they got to undergo some stress during that, and so you always see some fallback on those fish. That they just kind of go with the current for a while, right, and kind of heal and de-stress, and but then they all often go back where they were tagged, and that could be several miles or could be several days on the fallback before they're willing to make kind of upstream migrations again and things. So yeah,
interesting. Hopefully
that's my best. Yeah, that's my best guess. So.
And then Tim asked the lack of bullhead on the Illinois River because of the carp. So some of these guys, do they chase bullhead a lot? Is there any thoughts on bullheads? Are they still out there in big numbers, or do you see like a decrease? Or
we have seen a decrease in bullheads. One of our biologists was kind of, he kind of actually took a look at this not too long ago. But again, if you happen to go onto that graphical browser again, you can actually see bullhead populations and different
So what is that site?
So if you just it's on the UMass or Upper Midwest Environmental Science Center. But if you just type in LTRM fish, you'll be able to find that page, and then you'll see something that says graphical browser, and they'll have some buttons there you can select. Oh, I want large hoop nets, and I want main channel borders, or if it's like bullheads, I might select electrofishing. Right, they're not really going to pick up boom nets. That's probably the gear they're going to be picked up the most. Maybe that and fikes or mini fikes. But yeah, and you'd be able to see the trends in those. We would typically encounter 3 bullhead species: the yellows, the blacks, and then the browns. Historically, there used to be white catfish, which were a bullhead species as well.
Is that what the Fulton was, or what's
blue cat? The Fulton.
So that's just the Fulton is another name, because you have some of the, not to call them old timers, but I talked to some people out here and they said they catch a bunch of Fultons.
Yep.
And they call them white cats, but they're blue cats.
Blue cats. Yep. Yeah, white catfish. They're more like they're an Amaris. They're more like a bullhead species, and even though that
kind of like the people that so back to the blue cats in pool 19, I think that they're catching not a blue cat, but kind of like you said, they look more like a male channel that maybe post spawn or real dark, or
Right. Yep. Yeah. You know how those males will get when they get real skinny, and they'll get, their lips get really big and their heads get really bulby. And, if people did catch blues in 19, I mean, I would believe it. But, I know talking to, one of the guys that runs one of the markets, he said, I think I asked him about 5, 6 years ago, how often he saw blues come through the market, actual blue cats. And, he said he maybe seen 5 in the last 30 years or so. So I haven't personally seen any up there. Not to say that some don't make it.
But if they did, they'd have to lock.
They'd have to lock.
It's
right.
the one dam in the whole river system. They would have to lock through.
Yep, until they get to like St. Anthony Falls up there. Yep, and there are ones like Lock Dam 14 and 15. They're not at open river conditions often, and they often have to lock. But most of the other dams are pretty open, a large majority of the time. Depending on water level gets low, they'll need to put the gates down so that, they can maintain enough, sufficient depth for the barges to move. But so I mean, bullheads, we don't have any evidence to tie them to, carp arrival, or any direct or indirect, studies that have kind of looked at that interaction. But it's really difficult to say what's, been the cause of the decline. Part of it could be habitat, that, that sedimentation is a huge threat, to a lot of our native biodiversity in the rivers and things. And, I'm sure, you see a lot of changes in the river and things that have become a lot more shallow. And, we were talking about, above 19 there and things too. And, you go on the Illinois River and, by the 1930s, the Illinois River, 40 to 50% of their backwater habitat was gone just because of channelization and putting the lock and dam system. And, basically it's diverting a lot of that sediment into those backwaters. And now all our backwaters are pretty shallow. We have no real deep overwintering habitat for a lot of these species. That a lot of those require that, to overwinter in, because they want to get out of the current, one, because they don't want to expel a lot of energy during the winter, because their body temperatures are lower and they don't eat, they don't eat very often. And so they want to find these really low velocity areas that are deep so that they don't have to worry about them freezing solid in those areas, and they can have refuge. And all those habitats, we have no really, until you get to like actually the higher end Starved Rock Pool, probably Dresden Island Pool, where you get much vegetation up there. And so, we've lost pretty much most of our backwater habitat up there, and it gets worse every year. And so, for some of these species, especially backwater specialists, I'd consider bullhead probably in that category, right? That they probably suffer because of that, sedimentation and loss of habitat. So.
Hopefully that answered your question, Tim. So Donald Moore has fished a lot of our events, been doing this for a long time. He said he caught a tagged fish 5 years ago that was tagged in the North Fabius River, and 7 days later, he caught it 3 miles below Lock and Dam 24. Fish traveled 75 miles in 7 days. The fish weighed roughly 34 pounds.
Oh, nice. Yep.
That's a lot of travel.
It is, yeah. It's remarkable just to think how some of those fish move and just can move through the dams, and when they're, when a lot of those Tainer gates are open. And that one big head that I was talking about moving from 17, it was like a 5-day journey or something crazy like that, from all the way, if you're talking, we're at the dam's like a 364, and I think 26 is like a 201, River Mile 201. And so, so that's like 163 miles there. And then they're going up to Starved Rock, which is, so it's 80 miles per pool. It's 240. It's probably like 250 up that. And so they're doing that in like, 5 days, going down to the confluence at Grafton, up the Illinois River, back, like 5-day journey. It's some of the stories are kind of remarkable. And what I've learned from our telemetry studies, you get some movers and some stayers. That you get some that they don't go anywhere; they just want to hang out. Sometimes you don't know if they're alive or not. Until eventually they'll kind of move a little bit. A few months later. But then you have other ones that are just all over the place. Like I said, some of those fish going to Gavin's Point Dam, all the way up to Missouri. Going down St. Louis, all the way up to Missouri, and up to South Dakota and back, and it's kind of remarkable. And then they know how to get back,
And that is what's crazy. Seth asked, any thoughts on tagging blues and releasing them in pool 19 and seeing what they do? So that was, I know there's some anglers that catch them and release them in pool 19. Obviously, I would say some migrate south. I mean, let's say that they put 500 blues in pool 19. Do you think they would stay or they would all migrate south?
I don't know. Like I said, fish can go over pretty easy, especially if, and it is quite the fall at times, right? If you got low water, like now, it's like, 30, 34, 30, 33, 34 foot drop, but we've had fish survive that pretty easy. And you get higher water in 20 when the water comes up, it's not much of a drop. So because they are highly migratory, there's, it's often they want to go up and they want to go back, right? And so, and move up and down. So I would suspect that, they would eventually want to keep moving. And once they move down, they'll be like, can't get back up.
Especially with there not being a lot of current, because blues like current for the most part. I think if they were born and raised, on the Mississippi and going to pool 19 is like a lake. So I'm curious what they would do there.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you get above Fort Madison, and they have those swifter currents, it becomes more riverine up there, more lodic versus kind of lentic downstream. But I don't know. It'd be hard to say. It would be very interesting. I mean, blue cat movement. Yeah, it'd be very interesting to see, what's going on with them, and how much they're moving through dams, and they're just the one that hasn't been tagged a lot in the system. But it would be really interesting to see.
How do you go about doing that? Again, I mean, to get into like a tagging system with blues or.
So the receiver network's already out there, so that's the nice part about it. That unless you had some specific areas you're wanting to focus on, and you wanted to know if they're going up into a certain backwater or a certain tributary or something, that you could utilize it, with the state and Minnesota, Fish and Wildlife, USGS, us, and universities.
I think that just my thoughts with 10 years of doing this, especially with Ashley and everybody, is if you took like a summer blue cat in this pool, that obviously they migrate up here, and see when and how they traveled, if they all traveled back. If let's say you caught 50 of them and see what those 50 do from July to October, would be a very interesting study. To know that if all 50 went back, did they go back together? It's just so unique how, you take next week or this weekend as a Jack and Jill. We're going to have a good turnout. We'll either have a really good weigh-in with blues or zero weigh-in with blues. One year we had a great weigh-in, the best weigh-in we've ever had. And then the next weekend, a 100-boat tournament in Alton in a terrible weigh-in. So it was like there's a majority of blues up and then they migrate down. But I think that if I could pick a study, my study would be, obviously because I live here, but it's just you can't catch a blue in the winter that you can. I've caught some in October, but I think a majority of them, it's like they go. And it's interesting because when you have a tournament, that's a lot of data. You got 50 boats out there, all with 6 lines in the water. That's a lot of bait. That's a lot of stuff going on. Obviously, you could have a bad day fishing, but that's going to really kind of tell the story. But it'd be fun to tag a bunch of blues here in the summer and see what they do.
No, I agree. No, that'd be really, I'd be very interested in that. That was one of the things that was brought up at one of our science and support type gatherings, looking at, information needs in the system, that basically looking at health and resiliency of the system. That with our LTRM program, it's more about looking at how the system's changing and really trying to get a better handle on habitat, how to restore habitats and things. But that is one that I think got some attention from other states, looking at some of the migratory species, whether it's sturgeon or blue cats. Blue cats was on the list. It didn't pass the last round, but it is something that I think there is interest out there in knowing more about what's going on there. But those tags, so we have tags. We put paddlefish up in pool 14 and 16. Those are 7-year tags. Like will last for 7 years. The battery in them. I think they're about $300, $350 a piece on those. So that's and then depending if you just wanted to rely on the receiver network that's out there, you could do that and find out when they're passing the dams and and when they're making these movements. And you'd probably be able to answer the question you're looking for. But there are options to manually track them as well. You get in the boat and you have this hydrophone, you stick it in the water, and you listen for them. You can look for aggregations that way and look at finer scale habitat for those. So I don't know. There's no plans immediately to do that sort of work that I'm aware of. But
so if there was money raised for the tags, then could that be a possibility?
I think we could probably talk about that. Yeah, I think so.
You heard it here.
Some of it might be, the river system here is very large, but something really cool we did on the Rock River was you're probably familiar with like the side, the side scan units, like the hummingbirds and I think we had a hummingbird solix, and you're able to build those mosaics, right? Like you can stitch them together and basically have these georeference maps at the bottom. And so we actually Spencer Phillips, one of our grad students, he did that for the Dixon Reach of the Rock River, the entire reach. And so he's able to basically find all these wood piles, and they're all georeferenced on the map. And every fish that he manually tracks, he can tell if it's on a wood pile, if it's on sand, if it's on cobble, suspecting if it's in riprap nesting at that time. This is part of that nest use study. But it's really cool because it's like there's all these log piles that are underneath the water you don't see, right? And so I think he found like 71% of his flatheads are often associated with large woody debris that's down at the bottom. It'd be kind of cool for any species that you do, maybe blue cats as well, that you could, there's bathymetric maps out there showing the depth, and you could create them probably with your hummingbird as well, right? That looking at depth profiles and bathymetry of the pools and the regions, you could get a pretty good habitat association between those species and where they're going.
I mean, one thing we've noticed in catfishing is obviously they love structure, they love wood, they love being able to hide and probably go after their bait, but it's tough to fish that. You know what I mean? So some anglers have figured out ways to, whether they're drifting above that structure and kind of making them come out, or drift, or bumping their stuff into it. But structure is like what a lot of us look for when we're out there. We're using our side scan trying to find that wood pile. So, but that is interesting.
There's a lot of cool technology. This is just an aside, but I don't know if you've heard of Ditson imaging cameras that are out there. They're like $100,000. So you should probably get one for your boat here. But that you can, there's the Eris camera that we were using that we could see, Rock River, it's kind of like this, right? Your visibility is not great. And so, we want to be able to actually see the nesting structure, these artificial nesting structures they had. And we had divers actually go in and inspect them to look at, at their integrity, as well as see if there were things dwelling, right? If they're actually using those structures. And we found out that, I think based on their position and things, that they ended up using those artificial structures, but there's a lot of natural structures that they were using, so that they probably didn't need those. But it was interesting because Ditson camera is so cool. You could see him, swimming, right? It's, with side scan, you see, right? It's just stationary, right? But it's a diver. You can see the corrugation on the big culverts that are part of the artificial nests, and you can see the fish, swimming by. It's like a live scope almost, but almost on steroids. Live scope on steroids.
Live scope on steroids. That's,
And
how do I get one?
They look really good right there on the mount on the back. They're pretty good. They're pretty heavy. You'd be the envy of all your.
So I got another question. Scott Rupert says, we did have a big spoonbill run on the Des Moines River until the silvers and the big heads took over. Are they eating the plankton the spoonbill need to feed on? We have no spoonbill or white bass in the spring. What are your thoughts?
Especially big egg carp, there's definitely diet overlap with spoonbill. But yeah, the gears that we use for a lot of our long-term monitoring programs, they're not great at picking up spoonbill, so it's a little bit more difficult for us to understand what's going on. But we do know that they're, especially in a lot of these areas, they're really skinny and their body condition are poor, where carp abundances are high. And so there's definitely a correlation there between high carp abundances and very skinny fish. There's, unfortunately, a lot of the monitoring we do, with the exception of the contracted harvest and removal of carp above, that we don't encounter spoonbill that often in our surveys, just because you often need gill nets and things to capture those.
Yeah.
There's not real sensitive to capture with the gear we use. So.
And what about sturgeon? So, I know a few people over the years that have caught some sturgeon, and I know that they've done put a lot of money and effort and time into trying to grow the sturgeon. And I think they did a crazy big deal on the Missouri River to kind of help navigate sturgeon. Do you see more population? Is there any change in that? Because you think that especially the catfishermen would catch more, and we just don't, especially up in this area.
Right. So, yeah. So you talk about lake sturgeon?
Yeah, I mean, just the lake sturgeon, the bigger ones.
Right.
I know they've been pushing for them, and I know they spent a lot of money on the Missouri River, like past Columbia Bottoms. They dredged out like a big area. I guess suppose they don't do a 90-degree turn or something, so they cut a big slough for them, and I don't know if that helped or not. But
that was actually a big deal down there below Mel Price, and so lake sturgeon, that they need to be almost 4 feet long and 20 years old before they reproduce even.
Oh, wow.
And they may only reproduce every 5 years or so. And so it's a big deal if you have this huge, big 60-pound gravid females that, I think historically they may have been harvested some for the roe, right? As far as, because caviar with shovel nose and things. And so their populations were hurting pretty bad, right? Because they need to be so old and so big to be able to reproduce, and there are these. They can live over 100 years. Which is pretty impressive for a fish species we'll find in the river. And historically, they get a couple 100 pounds even, which is just crazy to think about encountering a couple 100-pound lake sturgeon out there. But I want to give a big shout out to MDC. I mean, since the 80s, they've had a lake sturgeon recovery program where they've been growing them in their hatcheries and releasing them every year, since the 80s. I don't know if you're Travis Moore, Travis at Hannibal.
I think that's what I
MDC.
talked to. I think he was the one that was ready. I mean, I asked him, I had a tournament in September, and somebody gave me his number, and I talked to him, and he's like, yeah, you're not going to catch any blue cats this weekend. I'm like, huh? He's like, well, they're already in pool 24 or whatever. I'm like, how do you know that? He's like, they just are. And we had a tournament, and not one blue cat was caught.
Yeah,
so
he's a long-time river rat. I call him Grandfather Sturgeon just because he's been, part of that program for a long time. And I mean, what's really cool for him is that, the incident you mentioned, that they actually, they had someone that was fishing down there below Mel Price that said there was these fish doing something up in the kind of shallow rocks right there. And they investigated, and it was lake sturgeon spawning, which is really the first incidence of lake sturgeon spawning that's been detected for, decades probably. And they actually took some of the eggs that were their adhesive eggs that they adhere to the rocks, and they took some of those, hatched them, and they were like baby lake sturgeon. And so Travis is they've been working through one of the core programs to mimic those water conditions and gate conditions at Mel Price that contributed to that spawning event. And they were this last year, they were able to replicate those, and they were able to bring sturgeon in and spawn again, which was things don't work like that in our world. It is really, it was a really cool thing to see. And then they're doing the same thing on like the Osage River. They're able to help. Basically, they're trying to use those conditions to do that on that dam, and water release there as well. Just because the substrate was right, that rocky substrate. But So I think it was even this past year. It really, I don't know if it was earlier this spring or if it's last fall that they were able to they were able to recreate those conditions at Mel Price and be able to get them spawning in that area. And they sensed tons of them, monsters. I mean, 80 pounders and just down in there spawning. So it's a huge success story for lake sturgeon. It was,
So in the future, in 20 years, we might be able to catch more, or we might be catching more than we are now.
Right.
Like I said, I've seen several caught, but just not like, I've never caught one. I've had that one fish story where I was fishing above the train bridge and a rod went down, and I've caught enough catfish to know it wasn't a catfish, and it just literally just kept going straight and didn't stop until it broke the line. It was definitely something big. Could it have been a big sturgeon? Probably, I don't know. But I've seen some big ones caught. And technically, if you catch one, you're not supposed to even take it out of the water.
Definitely you're supposed to release it. So and if you can avoid taking it out of it, that's probably best. So.
Kind of like what they do on the Snake River and stuff. Because I know a lot of people from here travel to the Snake in Idaho to catch those giant.
Oh, like a white sturgeon
Yes.
thing. That's those are really.
Yeah.
But and then shovel nose, of course, they still, even in town here, they have the caviar business and they're.
So again, and I know I can't remember if it was a DNR agent I talked to, like with that, we're starting to see a lot of people out there harvesting those. Is there a point they'll slow that down? They'll stop it? Is there enough? And what's your thoughts of the long term of that, of continuing to harvest? Because we have a decent amount of harvesting in Pool 20 for those.
We do, right? And I think, especially, I think it was 2010, they had the similarity of appearance law down, so they closed a lot of fishing, a lot of chain of rock below Mel Price, just because they had similarity of appearance law with pallids, right? And that there was hybrids of pallid sturgeon, which are, federally endangered species, with shovel-nosed sturgeon, which are not. And so even some of the early generation hybrids were, going to be protected, and they're afraid that some fishermen wouldn't be able, the few pallids that are left, that there may be some fishermen that might mistake them for shovel nose, especially smaller pallids.
Yeah.
That, the pallids get really big, but they do also, of course, exist when they're smaller too. So I think that was 2010 when that closed, and then I think a lot of fishing effort moved up after that point. And we're below the dam, and we have those historic rapids here, and we have all that. If you've been below the dam, I'm sure, and it's pretty rocky.
There.
Right, and so they really like that. For they have adhesive eggs, and paddlefish do too. So things that walleye, anything that likes those rocky substrates to spawn, it's really prime habitat. And so I think we have pretty good shovel-nose populations. As far as when, how do we know if
If somebody checking
down
that it's not over harvested, I guess I didn't know if there's how that works, but.
There is I'm not sure what the size limit is. There's a size limit of what they can take. That's one. But, I don't think we have a lot of data to support a management decision one way or another right now. And because rivers are so big, there's so many things going on, so many species, and only so many researchers that often it's sometimes difficult to answer all the questions. But I think there would be interest in finding more, out about, making sure that's sustainable fishing there.
Yeah.
So
Aaron said that he sees large sturgeon on the down scan quite often down here in Alton, but never caught one. And I know Ryan Casey has caught, was showing me catfish, and has caught a giant one before down there. He's a guy down in St. Louis, but.
Okay. Yep. And so, this is, right below Mel Price. It's like Maple Islands right there.
Yeah.
And then it's, you're coming across Ellis Bay and West Alton Bay. You're going past West Alton and then down Ellis Bay, and the Riverlands, I think is the name of the core preserve that's there. Yeah, it's down there that people were fishing, and that's where they're all witnessed. Right below the tailwaters down there on the Missouri side is kind of where all that spawning was occurring. But yeah, I mean they were monsters, so it'd be I have no doubt that we've seen those big fish down there.
That'd be tough to get one in. I've never caught one. It's always fun to watch them, like in Idaho, where they're jumping out of the water and stuff. They're 10 foot long or whatever. That's crazy. So,
when I was a kibbie, we took a class from Warsaw up. We used to take them out electrofishing every year. We had we took one of the classes up there, and we ended up netting is like a 40 or 50 pound laker right below the dam there. It was kind of a calm day, so we were up there kind of in that trough with the dam. And huge smile. I mean, it was a kid holding it. I mean, it was a monster. So
So MDC is kind of running that program then, and that's the guy he lives in Hannibal.
Yes. Yep. Hannibal, Sableton area there. Yeah. He's been he's been at it a while. So really great resource for any questions on the river. So he's been on a long time.
Yes, I remember talking to him. It was several. I mean, it was probably 2017, 18, and I was doing a Quincy tournament, and what he was telling me kind of was crazy, but it was all true.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. When he's talking, I usually listen. So I just saw him last week in Grand Rapids, the National American Fisheries Society Conference was up there last week in Michigan.
Let's see, any other questions? So that's an interesting thing we'll have to talk about. I'm sure getting some people to raise. Nate said the Mississippi Valley Hunters and Fishermen's Association would be happy to help out with funding to get some tagging done. That's always like in our sport, as fast as catfishing is growing, the migration is a big thing is, whether you're catching them and releasing them and where they're going right after, or they're, when they come to spawn, like how far are they traveling? And it's just always been, we have so many events from this Pool 20 to Mel Price to understand that. I think would be a lot of interesting data,
right?
Having them come up. And Seth had caught a 72 a few weeks ago. There was a mid-50s caught last weekend. There's just a lot of big fish caught, but come October, the further south you go, the fishing's phenomenal. Here in October, you probably, we could have 50 boats out here and nobody catch one. So it's just interesting.
Yeah. No, that would help, I think. Yeah.
So obviously they're coming here to spawn, I would assume.
Presumably, or finding new spawning grounds or something. Yeah. Or, it's difficult to say exactly why, but, being cavity spawners, that theoretically could spawn a lot of areas. So, it's hard to exactly know why they're moving up.
Because it's one of those where, you can catch them in like May, and then the last weekend of May to the second week of June, you can't catch them. But then after that second week of June, then you start catching them again. What's your thoughts on that? That is, almost to a T.
Yeah, it might be getting, post spawn, that they're, and it'd be interesting to see if you're getting any, males or females, that, males are using their guarding the fry, after they're spawned, even if they're spawned a little while and hanging out there. And so, but the females have just gone through a very energetically taxing events, and so they're probably pretty hungry. And so that could they could be coming off spawn and getting out there, and so especially they spawn a little bit earlier than some of the others. So with carp up here, and this is the same thing you could do with other species that you tag. But one thing we're really interested in with our contractor removals is finding exactly like how to be more efficient with our harvest, and so being able to predict where we think they're going to be. They tend to shoal together and aggregate together at times, but so we use harvest data and telemetry data. We're hiring a person right now to help us model that to help predict, based on water level, based on backwater connectivity, which areas that we should go fishing. We're at the highest probability of capturing the most fish. And so, you could take a lot of your temperature data, discharge data, and things, and basically use those as covariates in a model to help understand, better seasonal movement of those fish, from the temperature data.
That's kind of like even skipjack in Alabama. There's a lot of the commercial guys that go catch them and sell them. They know, how much water needs to be coming out of that dam for that bite to be good, or time of day and stuff like that. They've got that stuff dialed in. So it's pretty good. A lot of the experience repetition, we don't see that. Because data don't lie.
Right. Yep.
Any other questions? Anthony says, how does he get access to that receiver network?
That's a good question. Does he work for a state or federal agency?
No, good
However,
try.
a lot of this data is, through whether reports or publications, that a lot of it is summarized, in one thing we pride ourselves is trying to make that available to the public for anything that they want. So,
Yeah.
any of these papers that I've been talking about or things that I can definitely try to, connect people with that literature that either we put out or some of the research products we put out. And the long-term monitoring stuff is all, you can download all the data, and do stuff with it yourself, or you can look at the graphical outputs that they're able to put together. And so, we're collecting to inform the public and, help inform management as well. And so we don't want it to be secret. So we want everyone to be able to use and have access to it. So.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Let's see.
A lot of times the data needs to be QA'd, quality assurance, to make sure that there aren't transcription mistakes. So we're going through and making sure that, identifying the outliers that might be, and go back and, that's a data entry error, and so a lot of times the raw data is not just handed out. We want to make sure we are able to QA it and, first, which is a pretty common thing.
What's your opinion? Nate Moore says, what's your opinion on why we don't have as many of the bigger blues north of Alton? Could it be lack of backwaters, food source, etc.? So I think, again, so he's from Quincy. And we just, you get down to Alton area, you have the Illinois River, the Missouri, the Mississippi, all kind of coming together. It's very unique. I wonder if that's kind of like their home, but then they'll spawn. They go up to Illinois a little bit. They go up to here, which, like I said, we have good and bad years. This year's been a very good year, but again, they just disappear.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I'm not really sure, why. I suspect that, having all that deep water habitat that, and basically a lot more, in a lot of areas, especially in Cap depth, there's a lot more water, down in some of the unimpounded parts, at least the parts I've been on down there. But otherwise, I'm not sure exactly why that might be.
There's really not a lot of, even in this pool, besides the lower part, there's not a lot of deep water. I'm not sure about Quincy, but obviously when you get to St. Louis and below Mel Price, that gets pretty deep.
Yeah. See, I thought you caught them all. That's the reason why there's big ones.
Yeah. I wish. I don't know. We'll see this weekend at Jack and Jill. It's going to be very.
And that's
very
here in this pool.
That's in Canton.
Oh, Canton. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So some will lock up, fish this pool. Some will lock down. But it'll be interesting.
Yeah. Oh, nice.
Well, good questions. It's almost 9:00. Can't believe that. That's wild.
Yeah, time flies.
So some of the publications that Jim talked about, I will kind of add those and some comments on this, and then I'll also make another post and kind of go over some of that stuff. But it's a lot of good stuff. And again, he was in charge of the class. I think it was Ashley and a few others that did the study 2 years ago. So I'll put that publication because that's out for the public, right?
So Ashley's thesis is out, but then we published something with looking at niche overlap with some of the stable isotope work that Ashley did. So it does show a lot of blue cat results in there with black carp and then freshwater drum. I could provide any of those or provide a summary. A lot of Ashley stuff. What we saw was kind of on a genetic shift from once fish reach about 200 millimeters or 8 inches or so, that they start switching from more of a macroinvertebrate or bug type diet, and then to more of a fish or higher trophic organism diet. And then you see this big spread that they're eating about whatever they can get their hands on, really, even when they get bigger. And even from some of the diet stuff we saw, we'd find crayfish in there, or we'd find zebra mussels in there, and even on these very, very large fish. And I think they're pretty opportunistic, whatever, or we'd find these monster shad, or like I said, we found a bunch of silver carp in there as well. But so some of the stable isotope work, looking at stable carbon, stable nitrogen, and looking at the primary energy sources and trophic position of their that organism based on the prey. It basically sequesters that in the muscle tissue, and that's what Ashley was doing, taking a muscle plug, and then you can detect that stable carbon and stable nitrogen as it moves up the food chain, and based on the ratio of that, it gives an indication of where it's eating trophically, and so if it's eating at the lower bottom of the food chain or upper the top of the food chain, other fish, or if it's eating more plankton, macroinvertebrate type stuff as well. And then we were able to look at the different locations. You guys had tournaments, and they were pretty similar. That had pretty, the signature overlap quite a bit. So kind of indicating that they're probably moving around and feeding a lot, moving around a lot. So, but we can definitely provide access to.
We've always done a lot of other studies, even talking to some Tennessee biologists and stuff. The same thing, that I know that they had tagged some fish in Memphis, and then a week or two later they were caught in Kansas City, and some crazy stuff like that. So that's why I think it'd be cool to further studies, and learn the migration and movements and stuff, and especially in a unique. This is a very niche deal here because of the dam system, and it's just how many miles is that from? It's 180 from Melprice to here.
So it'd be like 163 or so to the dam. Yeah, right, roughly. So that's a pretty good split.
Yeah. So do you think it's weird that come October you can't go catch a blue cat in this pool?
Maybe. For me it'd be hard to, I'd really want to sit down and look at the data that, and I'm not sure there's a lot of data out there right now to support that, but there's a manuscript or a journal article by Sarah Tripp that I know they did some work tagging a lot of fish, I think either below or in pool 26. And I think blue cat were on that list. They're wanting to look at dam passage. So there might be some, she was using Vimco, now it's an overseas transmitters as well, ultrasonic or acoustic tags. So there is that paper is out there with looking at dam passage and several species. I think blue cat is on the list on there. So that could give you maybe some indication. But as far as surprise, I'm not sure. I do think water level does have something to do with it, and it could be seasonality as well. So would really need some more data, I think.
Data don't lie.
Yep.
We got to get more data.
Yep.
He asked Nate, that's what we're looking at. He asked if there's any tagging programs that guides or fishermen in general can participate in, like physically tagging fish and submitting data. I know some people in Alabama do some kind of, I don't know the legality of a lot of that stuff. But
yep. So I think, for any of that, it's considered with the state, there's a scientific collection permit. And I think and a lot of times we have to follow like IACUC protocol and submit IACUC protocols to basically do the least amount of damage and to fish and how we handle and euthanize fish and those sort of things for, I'd have to ask Illinois DNR, but I do think that's come up before, but I think it's, I don't think just anyone can go out and do it like that legally. So, however, if they have scientists on board, that might be a different story, right? That, if that's the source for the tagged fish, if they're, scientists are working with, we work with fishermen often, whether it be commercial fishermen or, recreational fishermen. So that could be a different story. So.
We're going to try to do it, Nate. Just got to do it the right way. So, well, Jim, I think that's a lot of great stuff. So we'll have to look up some of those publications and see what they got to say, and then we'll have to kind of come back next year or something and do this again and see what we've learned. But a lot of great stuff. And again, if there's any other questions you have that you're watching this after this was recorded on Monday night, just send them, or just write the comment, and Jim will follow this too and see if we can get those questions answered. But again, thank you for being on and answering a lot of questions, giving us a lot of data, and it's been fun. And like I said, anytime we can learn, what blue cats are doing, or their bait or their migration is something, because it helps us catch fish.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I don't know if flatheads are as attractive.
Oh yeah,
to you guys.
Sure,
but there are quite a few flathead. I think there was like 59 flatheads tagged here in pool 20, to evaluate dam passage. They haven't had any pass of those that as of I think
When
the
was-
last
when
date
were
I've
they
seen
tagged?
is June. They were tagged the last 2 years here.
So 59 flatheads were tagged.
Uh, 49. Sorry.
49 were tagged
Yep.
2 years ago.
Yeah, I think some were tagged. I think they're about half tagged this past year and half tagged the year before. So,
And none of them have left this pool.
there's one that made it to the lock, but then they didn't pass.
Wow.
However, this is just looking at upstream passage. They may have moved downstream some, but flatheads tend to be a little more homebodies at times, I think, anyway, from a lot of the literature that's out there.
Interesting.
And then there are some tags. So I mean, there is some data potentially that could be coming out on some movement of flatheads, and how they're moving seasonally, or that could be evaluated from the data that's out there if someone had an interest. So.
Like I said, all the publications I can find, I'll attach. There'll be some good read. But yeah, everybody. Also, again, thanks Jim for being on. Thanks everybody for watching, and hope to see you this weekend, Saturday, in Canton, Missouri. If you have any questions about the event, let me know. I know somebody's asking about the Alton Catfish Classic. Just send me a message after the show. We'll get that taken care of for you. But again, this weekend, Canton, Missouri, Jack and Jill. Hope to see you there. Weather looks good, and we'll see if we catch a bunch of big blue cats. And then our next Twisted Cat event is Tulsa, Oklahoma, Keystone Lake. That's September 30th, and that's going to get the points race back rolling. And again, the points race has been posted. So thank you so much for taking your time on a Monday night
Oh, you bet.
to hang out with us here. And we'll have to go fishing sometime.
Hey, I like that. Yeah, let's make it happen.
I'm down for that. All right, well, we'll see you. Thanks again for watching.